Thank you so much. Thank you to Jeff and thank you to Autumn for having me, having such a great group of writers. I'm really honored to read with a bunch tonight. And thank you to the cafe here tonight. And out there. Take care of your servers, everybody. All right, this is the hippie walk of shame. Join me now in my time machine as we go back to February of 1994 and my first Grateful Dead concert. There weren't many left by February of 1994, by the way, but I went to a lot of them between February of 1994 and August of 95. This is the hippie walk of shame. The Bill Graham goon in the yellow jacket took the tickets, picked up a water marker, and I watched helplessly as all the crisp-looking font smeared across the whole of the ticket stub, and the door guy was already shaking his head at us. "These are not valid, okay? Just go." He said it a bit too harshly. Even in that moment, Mexi and I couldn't help staring inside the doors where another enormous yellow jacket was already creating an obstacle between us and our friends, who had scored their tickets via mail order. This is 1994 after all. And not in the parking lot like we had, already on their way to their seats, not even noticing that we hadn't made it through. But, Mexi stammered, "Just go now!" That was the other yellow goon. We caught a glimpse of our one friend Billy looking back at us as we shook our heads and began the long trek back down the ramp of the Oakland Coliseum, or not the Oakland Coliseum, the Oakland Arena. The Walk of Shame, specifically the hippie Walk of Shame, with its universal message, "Get the fuck out now." Taking me to my first Dead show was Mexi's idea, and he had offered to pay for the ticket. How could I refuse? If it's for free, it's for me. When I agreed to do the deal, our other roommate, a cynical punk devotee named Dylan, simply shook his head at me in disappointment. "You used to be punk, Paul. What happened to you?" I shrugged. People had been asking me for years if I'd ever been to a Dead show, and they always looked shocked when I said no. My dad had been a pot dealer whose clientele were all big-time Deadheads, so he had Dead records in his LP collection and always left them hanging out so the clientele would feel a bit more comfortable about their surroundings. But when they were there, those records never made it onto the turntable. My dad could never believe that the Dead were the only band to make it out of the San Francisco Sound. In our house, it was Big Brother and Janice, Quicksilver Messenger service. It's a Beautiful Day, and even the Moby Grape. All of whom he felt had way more chops than the Dead. And based on what I heard on this collection of studio albums, that seemed to be pretty true to me. And going to my first Dead show meant arriving at my first Dead parking lot scene like nothing I had ever seen before. A mass spectacle of tie-dye tents, VW buses, all sporting their psychedelic flags like little bits of mind-expanded victory spread out over the entire parking lot of the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum complex. Smoke emanated from hundreds, if not thousands, of grills, preparing all kinds of food, and frequently, one suspected, from huge circles of freaks powering industrial-sized bombs. It was like someone had teleported the 60s right into the 90s, but with all the modern accoutrements thrown in. A time machine quagmire of tribal hedonism. And if I was at all concerned about my punk cred as I came upon the scene, that absurdity quickly vanished in a haze of pot smoke, microbrews, and scantily clad young ladies. Surveying the scene before me, plunging headlong into this wonderful morass, Mexi assured me that our show tickets were within. In the less than half an hour it took to find the guy who sold us our fake tickets for $35 a piece, I saw every kind of vendor looking to trade every kind of wear possible for any kind of currency. Homemade posters, homemade stickers, homemade clothing, homemade paraphernalia, arts and crafts, burritos, pot brownies, and beverages could all be exchanged for tickets, drugs, money, and spots on buses headed north to the next gig. One extraordinary young woman was selling Jerry Carchia pets. She had her own display of self-designed ceramic Jerry head, which appeared clean-shaven, like one might have seen on the cover of his second solo album. Then there was the finished product, where the plant had grown in, like sprouts growing out of the holes in his chin to create the famous Jerry Garcia beard. I realized at that moment that I could fall in love with anyone in this parking lot for at least 5 minutes for just the right hustle. Mexi then discovered the ticket guy who would undo us. We concluded the deal amicably and even offered to smoke the guy out, but he declined curtly and began walking away. Mexi handed me my ticket with a huge grin pasted on his face, then suddenly turned and called out to the rapidly disappearing guy, "Hey, you got more tickets, or can we find you around here?" The guy jumped, looked at us with a strange expression, shook his head, and scurried away. And it did seem strange at the time. And we remember this quite easily as we trudged sullenly past the long line of people in the arena who were undoubtedly going to get into the show that we were not. And so we ventured out to the fringes of the parking lot, where the only ticket sellers were very large black men wearing satin sports jackets, starting price $75. No fucking way, Mexi sneered. We're not going to pay that. He was determined, because this had all been his idea. And as a veteran of over a dozen shows, he had never been burned on tickets before. He was taking it personally. And I suddenly felt bad, because I didn't want him to think he really owed me this, or that he should be blamed for getting caught. This had already been a pretty remarkable experience, to be honest. His agitation was reaching full pressure because the search for a way into that evening show was becoming increasingly difficult. The sun had almost set, and showtime was less than 45 minutes away. We may have missed all the last second ticket dumps. The more we scoured the aisles of the parking lot, the more we only saw tickets for the next night's show. And then a loud, persistent, hissing sound permeated the area of the parking lot we were searching. Hear those balloons, he asked? Maybe we should split one real quick and that'll help switch up the karma. What the hell was he talking about? Balloons? I didn't know. I quickly found out balloons meant nitrous oxide, which I had never done. So Mexi purchases a balloon the size of 2.5 human heads for $5. He pinches it at the top and says, okay, now we just have to find a good place to sit, preferably near some music. And so we find a spot where the song Eyes of the World is blasting out of the back of somebody's BMW. The important thing is to be sitting down, he explains. Mexi showed me how to work the balloon properly, first taking a medium-sized inhale to where it just barely tickles the top of the throat, and exhaling that portion back into the balloon, just before re-inhaling a much larger amount of the gas, which was then to be kept in the lungs for as long as possible before exhaling.
Yes!
This hit me like a fucking meteor. Immediately my consciousness transported outside my body, and everything in my field of vision narrowed into a tunnel dominated by the setting of the orange sun in the west. In fact, it was the particulate orange light of the sun that became visible as particles, as if I were suddenly privy to the arrival of each individual photon through the atmosphere, spilling all over the sky, the parking lot, and into my eyes. The flowing of photons came in a perfectly timed conjunction with another sound that swelled to envelope my ears. That is why they call it hippie crack, as crackheads get a similar effect, so it's called hippie crack. I was sure this was the sound. I was sure the sound filling my head was the hum of the cosmos, the sound that must radiate out from every black hole at the center of every galaxy, the sound that radiated outward from every neutron star, and with it all the photons of all the light that ever existed in this universe, washing down over all of us long-haired, mind-dabbling freaks gathered here in this fucking parking lot. After what seemed like forever, I looked over at Mexi, who was staring back at me with a huge grin again pasted on his face. He pointed past my shoulder, urging me to look at the other side, and there next to us were two more freaks. A younger guy and a girl with their own massive balloon. He was inhaling while her eyes looked glazed, probably much like mine at that very moment. But she was grinning at me as well and was offering up a bottle of Jägermeister. I happily took a huge swig off of it before handing it back to her and turning back to take my very next inhale from the N2O special. The next time my mind returned from the far horizon, 40,000 brain cells later, I saw the girl and the guy who had been next to us standing up, and she handed me the last of the Jaeger. Go ahead and kill it, she said with a big smile. Hey, I was inspired. You got any extra tickets? Mexi laughed at me. I already asked. No worries, man, the other guy said as they started to make their way in. I know you fellas will find a way in. And as I sat there in my own muddle of mind, watching the hippie guy and girl leave us, a whole other notion occurred to me. This wasn't just the 60s repeating itself. It was every Turkish bazaar, every orgy presided over by Meister Eckhart, every frenzied Gnostic revival in the wasted sands of Judea presided over by John the Baptist. These people were the Jerry Garcias and Grateful Deads of their day. But I realized it was also the future. I could see it in the girl's receding profile, younger and handsomer than mine, already with slight bags under her eyes. These long-haired boys and girls, future veterans of the psychic wars, now just into their 20s, wearing their ponchos, their tie-dyed hoodies, and their dreadlocks, will be the ones to preside over the decline of the American empire. They will be the units of consumption consumed and discarded by the collapse of the U.S. economy. And when that happens, this is what we would still have left to remind us that we are human. It was already all going to hell. All this gathering will be here for us as long as there are humans, because all of this had been here since there were human beings. And just as the cosmic Big Bang and the birth of every galaxy echoed the birth of every human and the striking of every drum surface, so this scene echoed the way the conscious beings of the universe would choose to interact and recognize all the things they were capable within their own. Mexi stood up slowly. All right, let's go find your first dead stove. Man, the show's already started though, man. He laughs. Show doesn't start for another 20 minutes, bro, at least. We've been here for 10. It had felt like an hour. Listen, I told him, man, no matter what happens, I want you to know that I've had the most unbelievably amazing time already, okay? It doesn't matter if we spend the rest of the night out here. It's all been totally worth it, and my whole perspective on the scene is completely changed, okay? He gave me a disgusted look. Don't give up that easy. Our tickets are out there, and we're going to run those motherfuckers down right now. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, Mexi found 2 tickets for that night's show, between a makeshift deep-fried vendor and a drum circle just starting